Hello and welcome back to one of my Scratch tutorials. And today we are doing a bit about maths, but we're also thinking about art too, particularly modern art. And the two artists that I'm going to look at today are Damien Hirst and Peit Mondrian. Now, Damien Hirst is famous for his spotty, dotty pictures, and they are very vibrant, but they are basically circles on a page. I think we could probably replicate his work using Scratch. Now, I must point out that he doesn't actually use, although it looks like it's printed digitally, he says that he paints them in that perfect circle form. We're going to make a more simple version of that. And then we're going to try and create a piece of Mondrian art. And Mondrian is another modern artist who creates these kind of square and rectangle drawings. Now, his work is worth a lot of money. One of his artworks recently sold for about 50 million US dollars. So big money there. I doubt we're going to be able to get it quite right with his amazing, very striking use of rectangles and squares, but we'll give it a go. Let's get to it. Okay, first up on Scratch, we actually don't need Scratchcat today, so I'm going to delete that sprite, and I'm going to go down here and I'm going to paint a new sprite. We're going to start off with, we're going to need a dot. So I'm going to keep my finger on Shift and draw a circle. So select the circle, keep my finger on Shift to get a nice circle. Now, in this case, I don't want an outline because Damien Hirst's outlines, his circles don't have an outline. So there we go. It's not got a black outline around the edge. And at the moment, that's huge. So I'm going to change that size. Let's see. Let's try and get it down to about 60. You will have to change it to the size that suits you, depending on how big you draw it. I'll go with that for now. Okay, so we've got our sprite as the circle. And what we're essentially going to do is we're going to have this circle stamp an image of itself along a row and then drop down and repeat that over and over. That's the plan. All right, let's have a look at the code then. Now, first things first, we need our sprite to start up here. And we also need the pen blocks. Now, remember, you might have to click on the extensions at the bottom and install the pen extension. Okay, because we're going to need that. We're also going to need this erase all for all of our mistakes that we make. So I'm going to drag that in now, and I'm going to have my event. So when flag clicked, it's going to erase everything. All right, that doesn't do anything at the moment, but that will help us as we're trialing it out. Okay, quick maths then. We want the dot to start up in the top left corner. How do we make sure it's in the top left corner? Well, we're going to be using coordinates. What you've got to imagine is there is a grid that goes across Scratch like this, and the middle is 0, 0. Now, 0, 0 is your x coordinate. Your x goes across because x is across, and y goes up. So that means this point in the middle is 0, 0. Over here, this is about minus 250 for the x. And down here is about minus 200 for the y. So up here is plus 200. And over here is about plus 250. Which means if we want our dot to be up here somewhere, it's going to be x is going to be negative something and y is going to be positive something. Okay. Now, thankfully, in Scratch, you don't have to do too much of this yourself. It actually does it for you. If we move the dot to where we want it to start, which I'm going to say is about there, and then we go to the looks, it says, it has it here, go to x minus 199, y 135. So you can see here that it's a negative x and a positive y because it's this side, it's on the left, but it's high up. So we're going to start there. Yours might be slightly different, but if it's something close to that, then that's good. What we want to do then is we need a repeat because we're going to stamp 4 circles. So we're going to repeat 4 times and we're going to stamp. Oh, I want to get that to go inside. We're going to stamp and then move along let's say 50 steps. Let's see what that looks like now. Right, we can see that it's moving along, but there's not any gaps between those dots. So we want to change this move to maybe 100 steps. Zoom in a bit better. There we go. Let's try that now. There we go. Nicely spread out. Now there's 5 dots there, but I only repeated it 4 times. And the reason for that is this final one here is actually my sprite. That's where my sprite is. So when I move that sprite, you can see that I can't move the circles because they're stamped, but I can move my sprite around. Okay, so I can just keep running that, and you'll see that it keeps generating that row of circles. So far, so good. Now, I would like it to move down to here and repeat the process. So to do that, now this is a little bit tricky because we need it to go back to the same x. So that's okay. So we can click go to x minus 199. But where should the y go? Well, what I could do is I could just take away about, I don't know, what's that, 55 off, and then we repeat again. So we could do it like this, and then so we repeat it. Let's see how this goes. Not bad. I probably need to move it a bit further down. So let's try 50 because it's going lower. Okay, that's not too bad. That's working. And then I'd have to do another one and then another one. But we like to be efficient when we're computational thinking. So I noticed that this is almost entirely the same. And the only thing that's going to change is this number. Well, we can do something clever. We can actually say we want to go to the x is minus 199, but we want y to go to whatever y is currently. So you have to go to motion, y position. We'll get a operator, and we're going to get a subtract, and we're going to say, let's say 80. So it's going to go to the x position, which is going to be the same all the way down, but it's going to go to wherever it is and then 80 lower. And that means we can wrap that into a repeat 4 times, and you'll see that this one is outside of the first repeat. So the first repeat, it will just move along and stamp 4 times. It will then drop down and then do the same 4 again and again and again. So let's see how this looks. Right, that's pretty good. We've got a grid of dots. So a couple of things I don't like about it. First of all, they're all the same color, so that doesn't look very Damien Hirst. And second of all, they're not very uniform. They're not very balanced. There's not much of a gap here, but then a big gap there. So then we're just going to play around with the numbers. Now, if you think about this, it's almost like a square. Okay, so if we've moved across 100 steps, we should really move 100 steps down. That should make it the same space. But you see, we've got a problem because then it doesn't fit on the screen. So maybe I'll change the size to 45. Let's try now. Okay, not bad. But now that I've reduced it to 45, maybe I can make the steps a little bit smaller. So let's try 90. Right, that's pretty good. I've got my dots on the screen. Now next, to change the color, that's simple. I go to looks, and I don't use the pen color tool actually because it's a sprite that I'm changing the color of. So I'm going to change the color effect by, and it doesn't matter what you put here, but let's say 15 each time. Let's see how that looks. I see what's happening here. It's repeating, but it's not changing the color on every single dot. It's changing it row by row. So I need to put this somewhere else. I need to put this inside this repeat so that it changes every time. Let's try now. Now look at that. We're almost there, but there's this little pesky bit here. What is that? Oh, that's my sprite. That's my sprite because it's still hanging around. So all I need to do is to put that hide at the end. And to make sure that it shows up at the start, I'm going to click show at the start. Right, let's have a look how this works. And there we go. That looks pretty good, actually. I'm pretty happy with that. Each time we get a different picture. And if I wanted to make it different, I could even change the color effect to 23. It could be any number, really, to get a different set of colors. Or we could even put a random in there. So it could be 1 to 40. Let's see what happens now. There we go. It looks pretty much the same every time. There isn't much different when we start off with that purple one. So the color effect does affect the change, but it doesn't really. Oh, it is affecting a little bit. We can see the different colors coming through. It kind of looks the same, but it is different. In fact, to make it even more different, and we'll talk about this soon in a minute, we can actually go onto the sprite costume and actually change the initial color to, let's say, a red. And we almost get a different set of colors coming out. Right, well, that's pretty good. I mean, we've already established we can create a Damien Hirst masterpiece using coding. Can we now move on to a Mondrian art? Now, this I'm going to kind of have a go live, and you can follow along and try to, and perhaps you'll have a better way of doing it as well. But let's see how we get on. Okay, so here's my first go at my Mondrian. So let's have a look what it looks like in action. Right, so remember, we're trying to get these rectangles to go across in different shapes and different styles. Now, my first attempt was pretty much exactly the same as the Damien Hirst effort. We've got the when flag clicked, we're going to show it. Now, this time it's a rectangle sprite because we obviously want it to be a rectangle. So on here, it's a rectangle sprite. It starts off red. It moves up to the top. And I've got it going across 8 times with a stamp. I've got a random. Just move my comment out of the way so you can see. I've got a move random 40 to 100 steps. And the reason why I've done this, rather than moving the same each time, is because I wanted the different size rectangles. So it's actually kind of overlapping other rectangles it's already drawn by using that random. Then I've got the change color by a random amount. And then I've got that same sort of code that I had from my Damien Hirst, where it just drops down wherever it is, but 40 lower. And then it repeats 9 times. So that's my effect. Now, it looks pretty good, actually. I'm pretty happy with the code, but I'm not happy with the style. So I'm going to change a few things. Okay, so this is my second attempt. Now, you can see something's going on here with this attempt. We're getting kind of the same colors. Let me run that again. And the reason why I've chosen those colors is they're very close to what Mondrian uses in his art. He uses lots of blues and yellows, whites and reds. I've probably got too much black in there, if I'm honest. Let's have a look what I changed in the code. So I didn't change much in the code, but what I have done is on the sprite, you'll see, I've duplicated and made 3 white squares, 2 red squares, 2 yellow, 2 blue. I'm calling them squares when they're clearly rectangles, and 1 black. So I've got 3 white, 2 red, 2 yellow, 2 blue, and 1 black. Let's see why I did that. So the same thing at the start, it goes up to the top. You'll notice I've changed the size slightly, so it's slightly bigger. And here we've got the random 100 to 140. So I've had to make those steps a little bit larger just because it's a bigger rectangle. But here I've added this in. Switch the costume to pick a random one from 1 to 10. Let's see, there are 10 costumes there. So now it's only, instead of changing the color effect, I'm actually only choosing one of those colors and it picks them randomly from 1 to 10. And I wanted to have more white, yellow, and blue and just the odd black to fill in. This is quite a lot of black in this picture, but then if I run it again, you'll see it only came up with a couple. Other than that, it's pretty much the same. Just like I say, the rectangles are a bit bigger. Starting to get there. Starting to feel like we're a little bit closer. But I think I can improve it a little bit more. Okay, so my third attempt. Here we go. Now, that looks busy. Looks a bit crazy. You can pretty much see what I've done here. And I've changed the rectangle sizes. So let's have a look at the code. I'm not sure if if it is any better, but it's certainly giving off more of a random vibe. Same thing at the start. Here I've reduced the repeats. The reason why I've done that is because I've actually made it bigger again. And the way I've made it bigger is I've actually set the size to a random value between 100% of its size to 150% of its size. So every single stamp is going to be big or even bigger, basically. And I've still got that switch costume in. That's all I've really done in this iteration. So when I run it again, and you can see we get this, it's not very balanced anymore, but then it kind of looks quite abstract, and I feel like maybe we're getting there with that sort of color scheme and the randomness. But then again, sometimes you get a not very good one. Oh, you see that one doesn't look great. So it really depends on how lucky you get with those randoms of whether it looks like a good piece or not. My main issue now is that all these rectangles go across like this, and I want to try and mix that up. So I'm going to have one more go. All right, this is my last attempt. And when I press go on this, it could look great. It could look terrible. Let's see. Oh, it's not bad. That's pretty good. Let's try and run it again and see how it looks. Not bad. Okay. You can see as I do more and more, it kind of goes over the top and it gets a little bit busy. What I think I need to do, if I show you the code, let's erase it and let's try again. See, that's quite nice. Maybe that black at the middle is a bit too much. Let's erase, try one more time. Yeah, you see what's happening here and what I've managed to do. You'll notice that some rectangles are now facing, if you like, upwards, whereas some are lying on the back, if you know what I mean by that. Now, this was actually quite difficult to do. I had to think about this for quite some time. The start's still the same. Now, my repeats are much lower, and that's really because the size is just so different between each rectangle. Then, every single time it's going to choose a rectangle to stamp, it points in direction 90. That means it's basically in this form. Okay, so it's lying down. Let's call that lying down. So it starts off doing that. It moves a certain random amount. Then it switches the costume. So all of that is the same, set the size. And then we have this. So I created a variable. I've just called it my variable, the one that's already in Scratch. And I set it to a random number, 1 or 2. And then I turned 90 degrees multiplied by 1 or 2. So the effect it has on the sprite is it either flips it 180 degrees, because that's 90 times 2, in which case it's just a flat rectangle. It doesn't change. Or it does the random variable is set to 1, which means it does 90 times 1, which is a turn of 90 degrees, which gives it this portrait version. So that little bit there, I had to create the variable to do that because I didn't want to just pick a random between 90 and 180, or we'll get lots of diagonal ones, and that's not very Mondrian. They're very perpendicular, his artwork. Whereas this one, it will either be flat or upright. And you can see here I had to mess around with this positioning too, because I wasn't sure if it was going to be an upright or a flat rectangle, so I needed to make sure that I had enough space. All right, so I think I'm pretty happy with that. I mean, it's not perfect. I think if I spent a lot more time on it, I could get it a bit more equal and get these lines to match a bit better. But I've certainly made an abstract piece of art, and I think people would probably guess who it was inspired by just by looking at it. So we got somewhere in the end. And I think that's it. I think that's where we'll stop. We've created some digital art today. We've done digital art, but we've copied some of the great modern artists of our time. And I don't think it was that tricky either. So I hope you enjoyed it and look forward to seeing you again on the next tutorial. See you soon.